Welcome back to the MOOC for Masters on Academic Writing. My name's Jeremiah Hendren, and I'm going to be talking to you today about cohesion and paragraphing. To kick off, I'm going to show you a paragraph, and I'm going to read it out loud to you, and I don't want you to analyze it or think about it too much. I just want you to feel what it feels like to listen to and to read this paragraph. A radically different structure for the salt of deoxyribose nucleic acid is put forward here. Two helical chains, each coiled around the same axis, are defining features of this structure. The usual chemical assumptions have been made, namely that phosphate diester groups joining the beta-D-deoxyribofernose residues with 3', 5' linkages comprise each chain. A dyad perpendicular to the fiber axis relates the two chains, but not their bases. Furthermore, right-handedness is exhibited by both chains, but the sequences of the atoms in the two chains run in opposite directions, owing to the dyad. A loose resemblance to Furberg's model number 1 is apparent, in that the two bases are on the inside of the helix and the phosphates on the outside within each chain. Now I want you to ask yourself, how does it feel to read this? Go ahead and take 30 seconds to pause the recording and write down a couple of adjectives that come to mind. Okay, welcome back. Now, when I ask my students this in my classes, they usually give me words like these. It feels like bullet points, it feels choppy, disconnected, too dense, it feels unfocused, feels like it's jumping around. I wonder how these words compared to what you just wrote down here. Now, the reason this text feels like this is because it violates the most important principle of cohesion. Present familiar before new information. Now, this is very easy in theory and very difficult in practice. If you're looking at it thinking, wow, that sounds easy, that's great, because it actually is. It's a principle that everybody should learn when they're 14 years old going into high school and then learning how to write for the first time. But unfortunately, very few people learn it explicitly. Such a simple idea. Now, I've got a little exercise for you with this text. What I'd like you to do is underline the familiar information in each sentence. Now, if you don't have the text in front of you, you can simply write down the words in each sentence that you'd consider familiar. Then I want you to look at what you have and ask yourself, where does the familiar information tend to be in each sentence? Don't worry, by the way, if you don't know what I mean by familiar yet. I just want you to use your intuition to do this exercise and work with what you think is familiar. So go ahead and pause the recording here. Okay, welcome back. So when I do this exercise, it looks something like this. You'll notice that my familiar information is always at the end of every sentence. Now compare this text with itself, written with and without the principle of cohesion. On the next slide, I'm going to show you the same text on the top part of the slide, but the bottom part of the slide will be the new text, written with cohesion. And again, I want you to just feel what it feels like to listen to and to read this text. We wish to put forward a radically different structure for the salt of deoxyribose nucleic acid. This structure has two helical chains, each coiled around the same axis. We have made the usual chemical assumptions, namely that each chain consists of phosphate diester groups joining beta-D-deoxyribofernose residues with 3', 5' linkages. The two chains, but not their bases, are related by a dyad perpendicular to the fiber axis. Both chains follow right-handed helices, but owing to the dyad, the sequences of the atoms in the two chains run in opposite directions. Each chain loosely resembles Furberg's model number 1, that is, the bases are on the inside of the helix and the phosphates on the outside. Now this text is actually a very famous text written in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick. They won a Nobel Prize for it because this is the text that first gave the famous double helix structure of DNA that everybody has seen many images of today. And when you read this text, I hope you notice that this image of the double helix very easily emerges in your mind while you read the text. This is because it honors the principle of cohesion, and it can paint a picture in our minds because of that. Now I'm going to revisit this question of what familiar information is. What do I mean by this word familiar? Well, it can actually mean a couple of different things. The first thing is a set of subjects that are the theme of the text. Now, in this case, the set of subjects would be especially the word structure that is repeated many times, but then also they talk about the different chains that comprise the structure. So they say each chain, they say the two chains, both chains, right? Each chain again. And so these two words, structure and chain, I would say are the set of subjects that are the theme of this text. Now, in a more complicated text, you might end up with many more words, but the point is that the subject choices don't deviate from the main theme of what you're talking about. You can think of it as being the main characters of your text. Who are the protagonists of your text? Secondly, you might take subjects from information in the previous sentence. Now, the best example of this is moving from the first sentence to the second sentence. In the first sentence, we have a radically different structure as the object of the verb, and this object then becomes the subject of the next sentence, right? This structure. So this is also a great technique to move from A to B, then from B to C, then from C to D. These two first points are the most important principles of cohesion, but there are a few other points that could also be called familiar information, namely introductory phrases that connect to the previous sentence. In this case, the only example I have is this phrase, owing to the dyad. Now, the sharp observers among you might notice that this is actually in the middle of a sentence, but this is a sentence with two different main clauses, so this is still introductory material, so to speak. In this case, the only thing I'd say is beware of using too many introductory phrases. When people are just learning how to write, they think that these connecting words are an essential part of cohesion, and so they throw in words like moreover, therefore, nonetheless, nevertheless, having said that, other phrases, longer phrases like that. And actually, the effect of those words is often not to give cohesion, but rather to fake cohesion. Because what do you do when you're a writer and you have two sentences that you wish were connected, but they somehow don't feel connected? You think, well, I'll just throw in a moreover, and then the reader will see how they're connected. But actually, that's faking cohesion. It's not giving authentic cohesion. So the most important takeaways here are the first two principles here, and then sometimes use introductory phrases when you're actually adding useful additional information, but don't overuse those phrases. And finally, universal subjects could also be called familiar. Words like we, current research, this paper, and so on. In this case, they use we many times. You can see that here. And when they use these kinds of words, they're not throwing off the reader with anything new, right? If you suddenly say, current research suggests, your reader is not saying, whoa, where are you pulling this out? I have no idea what you're talking about. Rather, that's actually quite easy to still follow. So this wraps up our discussion of cohesion here. We're now going to change gears and look at the shape of the paragraph as a whole. So here you have a trapezoid shape, which is the best analogy for thinking about paragraph shape. The first point to consider is having a topic sentence. A topic sentence is a summary of the main idea of the paragraph. And you can see in this case, the topic sentence says, we wish to put forward a radically different structure for the salt of DNA. This is a perfect topic sentence for this paragraph because that's exactly what they do in the details that follow. Now, this topic sentence is neither too broad nor too specific. They also use this phrase, a radically different structure, because in this sentence they're contrasting their own work with the literature review that they presented above, the previous attempts to figure out the structure of DNA. And a topic sentence is also a clear milestone for your reader. A very well-written text will have good topic sentences at the beginning of each paragraph, such that as a reader, you could even read just the topic sentences of every paragraph and get more or less a sense of everything that's covered in that article. So that's a good test for your own writing. When you're editing, try to read all your topic sentences and then ask yourself, am I able to get a sense of the whole just by reading these topic sentences? And as a reader, you also know that when you're reading something and you maybe get a bit bored by the content, or you're reading something that's already very familiar to you, you might skip what you're reading and you jump down to the next topic sentence because you naturally go to the beginnings of the paragraph expecting a milestone in the text. One more thing to keep in mind with topic sentences is that in the Anglo tradition of writing, we always try to put the main idea first. So this means you put your main argument or your main claim, or in scientific writing, you could say your main hypothesis. You put this at the beginning, and then you basically tell the reader, this is my main idea, now let me prove it to you. You don't try to make your reader sleuth around in your text to figure out what you're trying to say. You say exactly what you mean to say, and then you try to support that idea with evidence and detail. So topic sentence first, and then the rest of the paragraph gives evidence and detail to prove this topic sentence. So now we get to the paragraph transition. And when you get to the end of the paragraph, you want to think, what is the next step? Ask yourself this. What's my next step from here? Then you want to connect some element of the previous paragraph into your next topic sentence. So go ahead and pause the recording here and take maybe 3 or 4 minutes to think about a couple of different directions that you as the writer could take this text. If you were writing about the structure of DNA, what could be your next topic sentences, or maybe 1 or 2 options for your next topic sentences here? Go ahead and pause. So welcome back. In this case, the authors chose this sentence. The novel feature of the structure is the manner in which the 2 chains are held together by the purine and pyrimidine bases. In this case, you can clearly see how they took something that was from the previous paragraph, right? They make reference to the structure again, and then they say, well, we want to now, having given the general structure, we want to go into the details a little bit and talk about the novel feature, which is the essence of our paper, of our discovery in this paper. But of course, this could also have taken many other directions. So thank you very much. This has been the presentation about cohesion and paragraphing. If anybody is interested in reading more about this, this article I took here as a good example of cohesive writing, here's the reference at the bottom of the slide. And the whole thing is actually written in a very cohesive way, so it should be an instructive way to analyze this topic further. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.